And we're live. Michael, I first came to know you through your food blog, The Hungry Culchie. And I tried to ask, how it started and where it came from. And you mentioned Bangkok, but then you started talking about Africa. And then you've done a fair bit of travelling, it's fair to say.
A nice bit, yeah, and I suppose that's where it all kind of stemmed from, travelling around and trying different cuisines and food from around the world, which is, I suppose, where the passion came from. But yeah, the travelling was a huge part of it. It started off, I suppose, after school, after secondary school, and when I first started earning money. Everyone kind of goes in their J1 or aims to go in their J1 during college. So that was my first, I suppose, long period of time away. That was in New York. I think I was about 20 years old at the time, so I suppose a year below the legal drinking age, which was part of the fun over there. But got really lucky. I guess it was just, I suppose it was just after a breakup of my, I suppose, first major relationship, or what you perceived to be major at the time, I suppose you could say. So I was kind of looking for an out for the summer. And I guess it was in college, and this company had come over and they were looking to hire, I think it was 30, 40 Irish students for the summer. Beach out in the coast in New York, out in Long Island.
Lovely.
Had never been to the States. From a very small town of like 3,000 people, country boy. So like the biggest place I suppose I had been up until it was like, small holidays and bits and pieces. But said, okay, this is for me. So a couple of months went by, had it all tied up, paid the deposit and all the rest of it, and took off to New York for the summer. And I suppose that was the first big trip. The first, I suppose, the first period of time where I was away from home for more than 2 weeks, away from my mum, my siblings and stuff like that.
You had a bit of a bug, though, before you got to New York, though, did you?
A little bit. I suppose you could say, I suppose, minor holidays and stuff like that. But it all kind of started, really the magazines that you collect when you're young. You kind of get a new one every week. It's just my mum, I must have been, I'd say maybe 10 or 11, so I was quite young. And my mum started getting me the Where's Wally catalogues. And the Where's Wally catalogues was like every week he'd go to a new location, we'll say a new country. And I suppose travelling wasn't a big thing in my family. Like my mum didn't really travel. My dad does not fly, like has never flown. He has a fear of flying, so will not get in the plane. So the furthest he's been, I think, is France, because obviously you can get there by boat. So my dad won't fly. So I suppose travelling wasn't something I picked up from my parents, or even my brothers or sisters. They didn't do a whole pile of travelling. But it was, I suppose you could say the Where's Wally books, which would be funny because I just became obsessed with them. We'll get a new one every week. It would be a new country. And I suppose he'd be talking about and helping you learn about all the fascinating things about that country, whether it be Egypt or whether it be Thailand or parts of Europe or South America. And I built up this massive catalogue of these books. So I always had this fascination for geography and new cultures and different types of food from around the world, etc., etc. So that's kind of where it stemmed from. And then, off to New York then, I suppose, first year of college, and just expanded from there. Like every year I was trying to get somewhere new. I suppose, and it held me back in some aspects. I still don't have my full driver's license. I'm 30 years old. Every time I kind of got to that stage of having enough money to buy a car, and the insurance, which of course was huge for a young driver, a young male driver, I would always spend that money on like a real nice holiday, like as in traveling for a month or for a month and a half during the summer, whatever it might be. So that's what I was spending my money on. It was always on traveling. Every single summer, every opportunity I got since the New York trip was always on traveling somewhere and trying to get to as many countries as possible and tick off as many, I suppose, items on my bucket list as I possibly could.
And did you do the whole interrailing thing, or where did you go?
Never did the interrailing thing. Never did the interrailing thing. I suppose in Europe, it was very much music festivals. So when I would travel around Europe, I would try to get to I suppose, a music festival of a band or a DJ that I liked at the time. So I suppose when I was in Belgium, I had done Tomorrowland, which was, I suppose it's almost impossible to get a ticket for that now. And then Croatia was Ultra Music Festival, and so it's always like a music festival of some form when I would go around Europe. So that was, I suppose, mainly the Europe part of it, yeah.
And what took you, because when I asked you about the food blog, which we'll definitely get to, that kind of started in Bangkok. Did you do Europe and then head to Asia, or
It was more so, I suppose, there was bits in between, and then I suppose when I had finished college, when I had got my degree, I was working with the National Students' Union for a year, which was, I suppose you could say, physically and mentally exhausting, just the year of it. It's an elective position, and at the time I was, I suppose, in charge of assisting the colleges in the south of Ireland. Cork, Tralee, even Waterford was in that, Tipperary.
And sorry, is that a kind of a national body that?
Yeah,
okay.
Union of Students.
I wouldn't.
Ireland.
I'm not familiar with it at all.
Yeah, Union of Students in Ireland. So like the national body. So I guess like I had done my time in Tralee, had got my degree, etc. Had done, like I said, a bit of travelling beforehand. But it was when that finished, I decided I wanted to travel for a couple of years. I wanted to kind of get out. So I had done Europe, did a lot of Europe that summer, and then kind of came home from Europe. Was home for about, I think, about 2 weeks. And then left for Uganda, and I guess the whole Uganda thing had come about because of working with local charities in the Students' Union. I got to college, I think it was 19 when I started college, 18, 19, and very quickly got involved with the Students' Union. And the Students' Union in Tralee, I suppose, would have had a long history of working with local charities, very heavily charity-based Students' Union. So I was helping them out in various different projects and programs, etc., fundraisers. And then with the National Students' Union, of course, you're working with national charities, and it's on a much larger scale. But when I was in Tralee, with the Students' Union, I was communications officer for a year, then vice president, and then president. And the president of the Students' Union every year chooses their charity of choice, if you will. And still, I suppose my circle of death would be very small. So we've been, I suppose, our family hasn't really been affected by anything major in terms of, I suppose, like what other families have gone through in terms of families dealing with cancer, etc. So it was very much, when I was asked to choose a charity, I had to find something that, okay, I want this to go to something really worthwhile. Would always go to my mum for advice, like for everything still.
Right.
So I was discussing with my mum, and she informed me there was two nuns from Roscrea, from where I'm from. So like I said, it's a small town, like 3,000 people. And they had moved to Uganda, it was 40 odd years ago, to set up a school. That was what their project was. And they started off basically with no school books, and they're just like in fields, pretty much, to try and give the locals an opportunity at life in Uganda at the time. And I suppose to a certain aspect, even to this day, having English, having that second language is of huge benefit. You kind of open up opportunities for so many more jobs, and I suppose essentially can pull yourself and your family out of poverty, or make yourself, I suppose, that little bit more comfortable. So told me about these nuns that had gone over to Uganda, and I just thought it was fantastic. I was like, oh, I really want to know more about this. So contacted them. And it was very much like an email would be sent, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, an email would come back, and it was kind of back and forth for a while.
The fibre wasn't that good in Uganda, I presume.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. But I suppose that in time I got to learn about what they were doing and what they were trying to achieve there, and how far they had come in the 40 years that they were there. So a nephew of theirs who I would have played music with, I grew up playing traditional music, button accordion, although not so great. Grew up playing the button accordion, would be from an Irish traditional music family, I suppose you could say.
Trad background.
Trad background, yeah. And I suppose their nephew had gone over to them on one or two occasions. So I met with him, just kind of asked him what to expect. Could he fill me in on I suppose, the nitty gritty stuff of the school and what they're looking for. So he did. So that's when I decided to say, okay, this is going to be my thing. I'm going to, give it everything now and try send over as much money as possible. So, like I said, the Students' Union itself had a very successful background of raising large sums of money for charity. So we had a really successful freshers fortnight, raise and give week, rag week, of course, where you have the big party for Monday to Friday, which was fantastic and was like so much fun organising that and all the rest of it. And then we had fundraisers throughout the year. So I think at the end of it, through the various fundraisers during the year, and with money also going to, we'll say, local charities, I think we sent over the equivalent of about 12,500 to the school.
Good stuff. Go a long way there, I'd say.
It's an astronomical amount of money for them. So I guess we had sent it over, and I was still in the Students' Union in Tralee at the time. And every time I would speak to them, I suppose they became friends as such. They would send us over school grades of the children that we had sponsored. The 12.5 went to, I think it spread out about 22 children in total. Some a little bit older than others. A lot of the children in the school would come from very, very poor backgrounds. A lot of them would be orphans. A lot of them would be Rwandan. Their parents maybe having moved to Uganda after the genocide, 91, 92, I think it was. So it's a bordering country. So it kind of, a lot of them came over and were trying to, I suppose, start their lives afresh. Some of them lost their parents in the Rwandan genocide and were therefore being raised in Uganda. So I guess like the school, it was for extremely poor children. And I suppose what started off in a field had grown. They had their own buildings. They had like a convent up at the top. They had a building where Sunday Mass would take place every Sunday morning, which is like nothing you've ever seen. Like a Ugandan Sunday Mass is really not like ours. Really like a session, a celebration, if you will.
Praise the Lord kind of stuff.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. But I guess she had been asking me to come over for a long time, and to kind of like, we'd love for you to come over and to see what we've done with the money that was sent over. So I guess there was, I felt the need to kind of give feedback to the people who had contributed to what we had sent over, which would be, I suppose safely to say, like the vast majority of students in IT Tralee at the time, friends, family, and then I suppose close friends of mine who saw that I was passionate about this, or guys in the college who I suppose did their own fundraisers, and of course members of the Students' Union who were every bit as part of it as I was. So I guess I had done the year with USI and was just exhausted by the end of it, and I said, okay, this is a perfect time to kind of go over and see I suppose everything that had been described to me in emails and in, I suppose, very few pictures over the past year and a half it had been since we sent it over. So I went over and I suppose very kind of cheesy even to say, cliche, that it was undoubtedly the most life-changing experience I've ever had. It was just incredible to see how they live off so little, but their personalities and how happy they are living with what I would consider literally nothing. They're living off the land. A lot of the people living around the school have no jobs as such. They're getting up in the morning, living in very, very basic homes made of mud, if you will, and they're getting up in the morning, tending to their vegetables outside. Maybe might eat 2 meals a day. They eat meat once a year. It's a special occasion. They eat meat once a year. Twice if they're very, very lucky, on Christmas Day would be the second, and they're just kind of just getting by, but were undoubtedly the happiest people that I had ever met, and it was just infectious. I was there for just under 4 months, I think 3.5 months, and it was the happiest period of my life. It was just unbelievable to be around those people, and kind of taking in everything that they're about and their way of living and how they view life, and I suppose like how happy they were living off the bare essentials.
And it's not just because of the simplicity of their life, or because they they didn't have the stresses of traffic and paying bills and all that kind of
That's exactly
what we would
it.
call normal.
Yeah, what we call normal, the absolute simplicity of it, that I suppose they don't have to worry about mortgages. If you build a home there, you basically send notice out to your neighbours, and because the homes are so basic, they're made from mud. So because the homes are so basic, they're up in a matter of 2 or 3 days. So I guess where our system here is very much, you know, a long tedious system of meeting with bank managers and applying for a mortgage and making sure you pay the right people and the right fees, etc., etc. Their system is very much letting the neighbours know you're building your home. Everyone comes together. You provide, I think it was called waraji, which is the homemade booze, food, and it's done in a matter of 2 days, and you have your home. And just the simplicity of it, they have very little worries in terms of, they don't have to worry about electricity bills, or a lot of them don't have to worry about, we'll say jobs as such, and they just live very, very simple lives. And because I suppose like what you said, what we call normal, a lot of the stuff that we stress about and that we worry about, when I suppose taken in the larger context of it, isn't really important. And that's what that trip taught me, that, like, I suppose, and I still do it, of course. I've reverted back, not fully, but, you know, I still find myself, you know, every now and again giving out or worrying about really silly stuff that really isn't important.
There's nothing on the 800 channels on the telly, like.
Exactly. There's nothing on the 800 channels at the telly, or even now at the minute, like, is in, I suppose, my big thing at the minute is I'd love to own my own home. And it's something that, not that I stress over, but something, it's, I suppose, it's a point of my life that I really want to get to. I really want to, like, own my own home. I think, like, there's, it's, as I view it, I'm like, oh, see, I'm doing so well in all these other areas, you know, and I'm so happy with this and I'm so happy with that, and, you know, I've got a real nice apartment, and I'm with my girlfriend, you know, over 3 years, and everything's great, and I really love my job, etc., etc. But I just love my own home. But I think once I had my own home, there will be something else, and I think that's the case with a lot of people our age. I'm 30 now, that there's always something that you feel you're lacking. You always want, you know, something a little bit extra.
Oh no, big time. And like,
Yeah.
I see it in even a kind of a trivial example, but it's the exact same thing essentially. When I started this podcast, you know, at the start I was getting 10 downloads, you know, a week, and I was like, okay, right, it's picking up. And then it was 20, and I was like, okay, geez, that's great. And then it was 50, and I was like, okay, right. And, you know, 50 became normal, and then 70 became normal, and then 100 became normal,
Yeah.
and I'm up on, you know, 400 or 500 a week, and it's normal, and, you know, that kind of way.
Yeah.
And you're always kind of looking forward, and never, again, you know, sick bag at the ready, but you're never living in the moment. Do you know that kind of way? And I suppose that the guys in Uganda are, but by the sound of things.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I just, like, everything about the culture was just, I suppose, very different to what I expected. And I suppose that's to be expected as well. Like, when I said I was going over there, a lot of people are saying, oh, you know, make sure to be careful. Like, you know, you need to be careful going over there. And I was like, yeah, I will be. But I suppose I don't know why we had, it's the safest place I've ever been. Like, absolutely no hassle. Never saw so much as a row in the 3.5 months I was there.
It's funny you say that, because again, like when I close my eyes and I think of Uganda, and of course I have the movies to blame for this, but I think, you know, dodgy lads with sunglasses and AK-47s, you know, thundering through the jungle in trucks, and the village that you describe, you know, running for cover every time they come through, but obviously not the case.
Well, I suppose there is that part of it as well. They had a president there for a long, long time, and he would win the votes for president by, I suppose, numbers that were just not realistic. So it was rigged pretty much every year. I think he was president there for something like 14 or 15 years at one stage, until I think he lost the last one. But there is that side of it as well. It gets dangerous around voting time, which is, I suppose, when I would still be in regular contact with them. Around voting time is the only time where I suppose it's not 100% safe to go there, where I suppose people's tempers are at a high. But I guess we've had that ourselves, like here in Ireland. Like we've gone through a period of time where we've gone through that ourselves.
Yeah, we kind of forget that. I think how
Yeah.
recent that was too.
Yeah,
How turbulent
absolutely.
our own past
Yeah,
was.
absolutely. But I suppose the reality of it when I went over there, of how they were, I suppose as a culture and as a country compared to what I thought I was going over to, could not have been more different. Extremely honest people. I could, like as in, I could drop my wallet anywhere in the town and they would know, like, you know, the white man out
Yeah.
by the school, you know, he owns that, you know, and I would be guaranteed that that would come back to me. Like as in, I was seeing how little these guys were living off, and every morning I would wake up, I would go out to my front door, out the back. I was living in the teachers' quarters, and out the back the teachers would be tending to their vegetables and stuff like that, and there would be an array of, I suppose, gifts at the front door, everything from bananas to fresh vegetables, so as I could cook my own meal in the evening time. And with me I brought, I guess you could say, like, I imported bits and pieces, like as in I brought curry pastes with me and stuff like that. And I suppose with the basics that we had there, the vegetables, and you could go into town and buy meat, whatever you needed. Now when I say town, that was also extremely basic. Very similar to like what you're saying when you see in the movies, like shacks on the side of the road. That's very much, I wasn't near the capital. I was out maybe like six hours from the capital, so very, very much in an isolated area of Uganda.
And sorry, just the village that you were based in, say,
Yeah,
was that? And again, forgive my ignorance, but
yeah.
was that like, tribal, or I mean, can you like your mud buildings with I know, leaves and branches for a roof type thing, or like what we talking?
So
Running water,
it was
or
Emberara was the name of the area.
Okay.
So when you say running water, a lot of the running water in the area would have been, I suppose, put there and would have been paid for by, I suppose, by the fundraising that the school was doing. Which is fantastic in its own way. So I suppose they were seeking support from people from Roscrea, who I suppose over the past 40 years have been sponsoring children and sponsoring the school and sending money, so as I suppose these two nuns can not only develop, I suppose, a school in the area, but develop the wider community. So I guess you go into Emberara in the centre, and I think there was one hotel, and that hotel even had like a swimming pool outside. But I suppose would be the equivalent of maybe like a 1-star or a 2-star here
okay,
in Ireland, which isn't much. So very basic.
and that would be for Westerners, say, would it? Or
Yes,
okay.
yes, people there, I would say, like on business or passing through, or for whatever reason they were there. But that was the only hotel, to my knowledge. And then I guess in the town you had modern buildings, okay, nothing like over 2 or 3 stories. That would be like, maybe there was one supermarket, and that had, like, I suppose that was for people who I suppose were relatively comfortable. So let's say like big businessmen or something like that would shop in there. I always remember the story, like when it first opened, it had an escalator on it, which of course so many of the people there had never seen an escalator, and they had to shut it down after like about half an hour because people were just coming in using the escalator and just going in. It's just like, isn't there was just like the whole village had arrived to use this escalator.
A free ride, nearly.
Pretty much, yeah. Everywhere around the supermarket was very much like tin shacks,
Right.
and they would be full of, now I'm talking miles in each direction, of second-hand clothes, second-hand runners. Then you kind of go down the back streets, and there's butchers, which of course are not like our butchers. The meat is hanging up outside in the extreme heat, so you can imagine what the smells are like and what it looks like. So it's very much it's like going back in time. Is what it was being there. There's like, I suppose there's certain parts of it that you kind of, oh yeah, you know, okay, it's 2010 or 2011 or whatever it was. But then I suppose when you kind of go out even towards the school, it was very much like going back in time. People's homes then, as you're kind of going out to the school, it was very much, mud shacks.
And sorry, when you say, just to clarify, when you say going back in time, are we talking, you know, 40, 50 years, or, 500, 600 years?
Oh, I'm talking 30, 40, 50
Right,
years. Yeah,
okay, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I suppose one of the things that I got the biggest kick out of while I was there is I brought my laptop, so the laptop that I had at the time, and they had I suppose certain electricity ports in the teachers' quarters. And I suppose phones were coming in at that time as well. So, like I said, there was certain parts of it that were modern,
Yeah.
but then other parts that were very much the opposite. But in the evening time, as like our entertainment, I had one of the hard drives at the time, and it was full with movies. And I would throw on a movie in the evening time, and the teachers from the teachers' quarters, and in the school there was only, I think, 5 boys at the time. The rest were all girls. So 5 boys at the time would all pile into where I was living, and we would watch a movie. And some of the kids were like 9, 10. The teachers were like mid-20s to early 30s. And we'd watch the likes of Indiana Jones, and even movies, I suppose, that at the time weren't modern movies, but
Yeah.
to
To them.
see the look on their faces for kids who, like, this is like the first movie that they've seen, and the whole idea of this not being real, that this has been acted out, was just unbelievable, like really exceptional, like an unbelievable experience. And I got a real kick out of that. So we used to do that in the evening times. We'd sit in and watch a movie. I can't remember like the other movies that we watched. We watched one of the more interesting ones was we watched The Last King of Scotland, which of course about Idi Amin Dada, who was president of Uganda at a
Yes.
certain stage, but would have been very much considered by the Western world as a dictator, but is still very much a popular figure there. They still speak highly of them, which I found very, I suppose, not confusing, but very surprising.
They,
I
and
suppose to speak.
is that because they'd bought into the bullshit, or like had they swallowed the propaganda, or?
Well, like as in, they're not Facebook, Twitter users. They don't have access to, I suppose, the media sources that we do.
Yeah.
So I guess like the stories that went around about Idi Amin Dada, although they would have heard them, I suppose what they have in front of them is a school that he built here, or a hospital that he built here, because of course he would have named a lot of them after himself.
Of course.
Like Idi Amin Hospital, or what have you. So they remembered him fondly in terms of what he had kind of brought to Uganda, which was strange because we see him as this evil dictator. So that was fascinating to watch that with them. And then Hotel Rwanda was another one that we watched, which of course I said the school would have had a lot of students who would have come from Rwanda. So watching that film with the teachers, they would have never seen it before, and I suppose and them seeing it in a sort of structure of it being laid out in a film and on a screen of what happened, was very, very interesting.
Jesus, I well believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah, my
yeah.
God. One thing that sprung to mind there earlier when you're saying you went over there and you saw where the money had went. I think people these days, myself included, rightly or wrongly so, have almost an aversion to giving to charities these days.
Yeah.
Because there's, I don't know, an aura that, only half of 1% goes to where it's supposed to go. Have you found that you've worked with different charities and you're in that kind of charity loop? Is that as big a problem as I might have been led to believe, or not? Or are there organisations that are better than others that you could recommend? Or
Oh, for sure, absolutely. I suppose the thing with charities is, of course, like bits and pieces have come out in previous years in terms of charities not spending the money correctly, but I suppose that kind of darkens the reputation of so many of them when it is a very small, I suppose, not just a small minority of them. I guess like there's so many decent charities out there and so many registered charities who spend the money correctly. And I guess for the school, for example, they would have had an account of exactly where every single cent went, which I suppose even like when people at Roscrea even send over minor donations, whether it be €20, €30, they basically get back to them and tell them exactly how that money was spent. But there is, of course, like I said, people have that perception of charities, but I suppose my personal opinion of it is that a lot of it is because they're just not educated in the area, so to speak. As in, a lot of people would rather say, sure, all charities are the same, and that's kind of like the excuse they have then for not donating, or for not, I suppose, giving either time or money or any sort of effort into benefiting the lives of people who might be less fortunate than they are. So it's so much easier to turn around and say, like, sure, all charities are the same. If I give a charity money, they're just going to spend it on, whatever, rather than actually looking deeper into it and finding a charity that you're passionate about, finding a registered charity that spends their money correctly, and donating to them. But of course there is, like, as in bits and pieces have come out over the years, various charities who haven't I suppose spent the money wisely, but for every one charity that comes out, there's 100, 200, 300 who are very, very strict on how they spend it, and spend it wisely.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So how long were you in Uganda?
So just shy of 4 months.
And
it's about 3.5 months.
Did you jump out of Africa then, or did you move around?
No,
or
I
where
kind
did
of
you go
moved
from
around
there?
a bit. So I guess while I was there, we had a parent day. I was lucky to be there for Parents' Day in the school. Now, like I said, a lot of the kids there, they didn't have parents. A lot of them were orphans. A lot of them, I suppose, on Parents' Day would have had guardians coming to look after them. It was a boarding school as well. It wasn't a day school. So a lot of the kids there, basically, they might not have had anyone. I suppose once they entered the school, or I suppose the level of support they had outside of the school was minuscule. And on Parents' Day, I met a woman who had 2 girls in the school. She was a Tutsi. So I suppose for people who are unaware of it, in Rwanda during the genocide, there was the Hutus and the Tutsis, 2 separate sides. There's a third tribe, can't think of the name off the top of my head, but the main trouble was between the Hutus and the Tutsis. Bits and pieces that happened in the past, but at the time, the 91-92 genocide, the Hutus pretty much wiped out the Tutsis within the country, and a lot of them fled to other countries. At the time when this was happening, this lady fled to Uganda, and it started, I suppose, building up her life in Uganda. Had 2 beautiful girls, and had put them into school in Coloma Primary School, in the school in which I was volunteering in. It was around that time as well, and over the course of a number of years, the current president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, was trying, I suppose, calling for Tutsi to return to the country. So there was like an outcry for, if you left, Rwanda during the genocide, it's now safe to come home and to start your life back here in Rwanda. So she did. So she moved back, but left the girls in Uganda. So I got to meet her when she came on Parents' Day, and I walked with her for a while, and she filled me in on, I suppose, this fascinating part of history that I knew, I suppose, very little of, but at the same time was just blown away by meeting someone who had lived through that experience. I think it was about 8 hours, 9 hours away, and she invited me. She said, if you're free some weekend before you leave the school, we'd love to have you to our home. So I thought this was a fantastic idea, to see a different part of Africa, to kind of go to a country that I'd never been to, and to learn more about, I guess, what she had gone through, and Rwanda as a country. So it wasn't long after that, hopped on the bus. I would say maybe it was a 20-seater bus. There was easily 50, 60 people on it. Like what you see in the movies, like chickens going up and down the aisles. Like it was just absolutely mental, but brilliant. And while I was on the way, I read a book called Left to Tell. And it was a book, the author's name, Immaculée Ilibagiza. I'm not going to even attempt to spell that, but the book is called Left to Tell, and it's basically a survivor's story of someone who survived the genocide. I was trying to take in as much as I possibly could, so as I had the basics.
Yeah,
before
a bit of context.
Exactly. It's a really tough read, but one that I would highly recommend people have a read of, or people try to find. You can find it in Eason's in Dublin. I found it a couple of times. I've come across it a couple of times, but arrived there anyway, off the bus, and she was waiting there for me exactly where she said she would be, and I got to spend a really fascinating weekend with her, learning about what had happened. and it really just was like something else, like seeing a country very much in recovery, where there's very much an eerie atmosphere still. When you walk down the street, there's a very clear physical difference between a Hutu and a Tutsi.
I was just going to actually ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the Tutsis, they were partly French, so taller, paler, and had I suppose slimmer features, I suppose you could say. The Hutus, I suppose, the opposite, smaller, darker, wider faces. Now again, you'd come across quite the opposite in
Within
some
the groups,
cases
yeah,
within
yeah.
the groups, but this was the general, I suppose, the overall description. So it was very much a country, I suppose, in recovery. But got to spend the weekend with her and her family, telling me all about their story and what they had gone through, and currently trying to rebuild their lives, and what I suppose Rwandans and Tutsis coming back to the country were currently trying to do. And I guess for people who were living there, there was this abundance of new people coming back to the country to start their lives afresh, and it just really was a really unbelievable experience.
And sorry, you said Rwandans there. So are Hutus and Tutsis? They're both Rwandan.
They're both Rwandan.
There's no such thing as a Rwandan which would be separate to a Hutu or a Tutsi, is there?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
I think
okay,
Hutu and Tutsis are the tribes. I think there's three main tribes. I think the third is almost like a pygmy tribe, if you will.
Okay.
And then there's the Hutus and the Tutsis, which would be the main one. They make up the main bulk of the population. So it just was like just an unbelievable period of time. They brought me to the Genocide Museum, which was still to this day the absolute worst place that I've ever been in my entire life.
I believe it.
Yeah, they lasted about 10 minutes, and they left because obviously
A bit close to home.
a bit close to home, but the museum itself leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. So they don't try and scale anything down, or there's no, we'll say, section that's safe for children. Everything is as it was. Videos, photographs, and the descriptions of what happened. And then there's a section of the museum for the, I suppose, in memory of the children who died. And that was real tough. That was pictures of the children who died and descriptions of their favourite things and what they like to do. And
Jesus.
it really was, I suppose, and what I took from it was that it was they didn't want to leave anything to the imagination, because they were like, this is what happened. Let's not let's not dumb it down. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's show it exactly how it happened. And to my knowledge, it's a requirement that school students visit this museum. Rwandan school students visit this museum so as they never forget the atrocities that happened there. But real tough. And I suppose, like, as in, I'd done the killing fields in Cambodia, which are horrific in their own right, but this place was really something else. But absolutely fascinating to go there and to learn about them. And like, when I say home, it was I suppose a little bit more modern to where I was in Uganda. A little bit more modern, but it was just cement rooms with basic bedwear, no electricity in this home. My shower was basically a communal shower that the I suppose the houses in that area used. So I was kind of pointed in a direction. I said, washing facilities, and I was given a bucket, and I went down and filled up my bucket of water, and just like a cup, if you will, and you kind of stand in this room with just this endless black pit in the middle, the size of a football, and you just pour the water over yourselves, and just very, very simple. And like, when you think about it now, it's like, oh my goodness, like, it's in how did I do that? But there was something very very beautiful about it, that like their life was so simple, and it was just fantastic.
And again, I've never been to anywhere remotely like it. And again, my mind's eye is kind of skewed from watching movies and whatever else, and the different misconceptions that would give you. But is disease rife? Are parasites a problem, or is that just my, Western bigotry coming spewing out of me?
AIDS is still a major problem.
Okay.
over there.
And and I didn't really want to get into it about the nuns and the chapel and that whole end of things, because I've my
Yeah,
own kind of beef
yeah,
with religions going to the
yeah.
third world. Is the AIDS thing a problem because of that, or
Well, I suppose I can only, I suppose I don't want to be speaking on behalf of them as such, but they would be very pro teaching. I suppose the local community about how to avoid, I suppose how to avoid contracting the disease. Now, whether that be using contraception or whatever that might be, I'm not sure exactly what they're going to. But a huge part of what they do is educating the local community in terms of, I suppose, from preventing the problem from getting any worse.
okay?
Yeah, I guess there is like is in disease over there, but I guess when we see I suppose Africa on the television, whether it be the concern ads or the troker ads, you see kind of the disease ridden parts of Africa, or like a 15-30 second clip of people going through, I suppose, life threatening diseases. But it's just not the case. Like when you go over there, you see a very, very different part of it, and I suppose you have a very, very different experience once you're over there yourselves. But in my experience there, I didn't see a whole pile of it. I know that HIV is still a huge issue, and a lot of the kids, as I said, in the school that were there, who are no longer with parents, have lost their parents through HIV.
Right, and
Yeah.
the kids, you just reminded me there when you mentioned the kids. How do they compare age for age? Like, is a 13-year-old over there the equivalent of a 20-year-old over here, or this, is it the same there thereabouts, or like, again, and this is just my own stupid, sheltered, privileged perception, that a 13-year-old over there would be an adult in comparison to a 13-year-old.
In terms of what they have to do, in terms of the lives that they lead, is it?
Well, yeah, that, and just in general, I suppose. Do you know that kind of way? Like, is, I suppose, what I'm trying to get at is this idea of a teenager. I view personally, my misconception of it is that that's almost like a Western thing. You're in Africa, again, this is my own kind of
Yeah,
ignorant,
yeah,
uneducated view of it, but you're a child, and then once you kind of hit puberty, you're more or less an adult. They don't have that kind of 10-year or closer to 20-year now in
yeah,
Ireland kind of buffer zone between being a child and an
yeah.
actual adult. Is that
I
is that the
guess
case
like
at all, or
in some cases, I guess like say for example, if the family is relatively poor, if they're still, I suppose, lucky enough to have their parents, some of the adults have to be convinced to send their child to school. So again, it's a huge part of what these nuns do. So to send their child to school, to basically say, look, as in, if you send your child to school, you're giving them a really good chance at life, like as in a really good opportunity to get themselves a decent job or a half decent job in the future. But I guess they're living very much in the present, as we discussed already. So for a lot of these parents, what they're doing is their child, regardless of how young they are, there are jobs available for them, whatever that might be, helping in a field or whatever. So I guess it's less money coming into the household if their child is in school. Now, primary education is a luxury there, is very much a luxury there. Secondary level education is a huge luxury. So you only really get to secondary level education, to get to go to secondary school, if you are exceptionally bright.
okay? So college education isn't even a thing, or
It is a thing, but there would be a very tiny minority who would get that far.
I suppose it just goes to show that it's a real it's a real cut and dry example of the poverty trap, I suppose.
Yeah,
Do you know that kind of way?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then again, there's huge emphasis put on, I suppose, the guys going to college. A lot of them would study medicine. If you get to a point where you're fortunate enough to have reached a point where you're at college level, a lot of these guys would study medicine, and then it's, I suppose, it's up to these guys then on whether they stay and decide to help their home country, or they could move somewhere like Ireland or the UK or pretty much anywhere in the world with their doctorate and earn 10, 15, 20 times the money that they would, if not even more than that, than they'd be earning in Uganda. So there's that huge problem as well in terms of retaining the guys who reach that point to stay and benefit Uganda rather than kind of move abroad.
And be
and
an
earn.
example for the next generation, of course,
Exactly,
like the
yeah.
brain drain, as it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
So you went to Rwanda and you met the mother of the kids at the school that you were in. Did you go? Where did you go from there? Say.
I suppose after that, I did Tanzania while I was there as well, but nothing too fascinating to report on there. It was very much just I suppose a religious excursion, but got to see a very small part of Tanzania. But then I suppose most of that was only for 2 or 3 days as well, like a weekend trip. But most of my time was spent at the school. So I guess at the school, I would take PE class. So I would take a class in the morning and a couple in the afternoon, do sports with them, play games. And I had brought over equipment, which was another part of when I went over. I brought over suitcases full of football jerseys, mainly Arsenal jerseys, like my old football jerseys and football jerseys from friends. Some of them new, some of them second hand, but still in really good condition. And that was something they didn't really have there either. Like as in they have the knockoffs. But these are like good jerseys with names in the back and everything like that. So a real treat to bring them over to the teachers and some of the parents as well. And then doing maintenance, I guess, around the school. So like everything from developing the playground. My sister's an architectural technician and her husband's an architect. So she had designed, given me, I suppose, the blueprints, if you will, of playground equipment that could be built using metal. So myself and the nuns, having these plans, brought this to the local metalwork store, who built I suppose the what we call monkey bars, climbing frames,
Yeah,
etc.,
yeah.
etc. So the guys are building these. They have the dimensions. They have absolutely no idea what they're building. It just looks like complete rubbish. Like, and we get to the metalwork store and we're kind of showing them that this is solely for fun. It has no other major purpose.
Yeah, no function really.
Yeah, no function other than this is fun for children. And then we brought it to the school, and like you're saying, it was a half an hour had gone by before even one child had got to go, and it was just like the teachers and the adults, the school completely emptied when we kind of brought the equipment, which is still there to this day, brought the equipment to the school, because it was something that they didn't have before, these climbing frames and monkey bars, and it was just brilliant to see. And to be able to send those pictures home from something that started on a laptop, putting a few bits and pieces together. Melanie would be really handy with bits and pieces like that. And then to see it kind of come to fruition and to see it up in the playground. And it was fantastic.
Yeah, and to know it's still there now.
Yeah, and to know it's still there. So it's everything from painting, playground equipment. And I did a lot of cooking while I was there as well, of bits and pieces I had brought over. And for the nuns as well, like as in cooking for the nuns. I think it was Friday I used to cook for them. I just stuff that they wouldn't be used to. It wouldn't be used to eating. Another part of being over there is I lost a huge amount of weight, but it wasn't from not eating. In fact, I'd nearly go to say as in I was eating so much more regularly than I would eat at home. But there's absolutely zero preservatives in what I was eating. It was literally dug up in the garden that morning.
It was actual food.
It was actual food. And it's the only time in my life, the only time in 30 years where I'd be shirtless in the mirror and be like, yeah, I look all right. Like I said, I look good. Like there's not like a belly there or anything hanging off me. Because it was just like putting nothing but really good food into my body, like greens and beans and nuts and like fresh meat with absolutely nothing, but like, no preservatives, no artificial colours or flavourings, nothing, for 3.5 months. Amazing. Tell a lie, bar the odd local beer, which was real good stuff, which would be on the doorstep the odd morning as well. You bring down your bottles and they'd pop the beer in for you for next to nothing, like 15 cent, 20 cent, whatever it was, a litre of beer. And unbelievable stuff, like different strength to what we'd have here. That's the only kind of treat that I have over the 3.5-4 months. And it was just good. It's like, the way like we talk about it here all the time, and people talk about like even myself, like the benefits of healthy eating, and this has that, and like, it's not relatively hard to stick to a very strict diet here. But over there, you have absolutely no choice. You're sticking to a strict diet because you can't. order an Indian,
Yeah,
or you
yeah.
can't, like, get a Chinese delivered to your door. So you're eating what's available around your living quarter, and it was just brilliant. Look, it's just complete transformation on how I felt, my energy levels, and very much how I looked.
And what's the staple crop, or geographically whereabouts is Rwanda and Uganda?
East Africa. So the
Okay,
boat,
along the equator thereabouts. Is it? It's in the tropics, or
it's bang on the equator. So it's funny you asked that. On the way to the school, you might have seen this. You might have seen it on the internet a couple of times. They have like a cylindrical monument when you're passing through in a certain parts of Uganda where you can stand in, and it's basically, they're saying
the north and southern
yeah,
hemisphere?
yeah, and you're kind of looking at it and you're saying, like, it's a not a tourist trap, because they don't charge you any money for it, but it's a gimmick. But then there's the guys on either side who, what they'll do is they have like a basin of water, and they basically pour the water in, like they have like maybe a flower sitting on the top, and they move it to one side of the equator, and it will go down clockwise, and literally within a couple of meters, it's that accurate. They'll do the same thing again, and it'll go down anti-clockwise, and they have the kind of arrows on it to kind of show you the direction it's going down. So it was just fascinating to see how accurate it was. But it's bang on the equator. The equator goes through Uganda, if you will.
Right, and what is that? I always thought that was a bit of an urban myth, that the toilets in Australia flushed, anti-clockwise, and where's it clockwise?
I've never been to Australia, so I couldn't answer that. But I know in Uganda, I've seen it myself. It's within the space of a couple of meters, if even a couple of meters. They go one way anti-clockwise, over the other side clockwise. It's
Right.
fascinating. Yeah, you'll see loads. You type that into YouTube. There's a number of videos of guys showing tourists how it's done, or showing examples of like a flower petal going down, or what it might be. But it's bang on the button. Yeah, so it's fascinating to see.
So along the equator, presumably somewhere year round, basically.
Yeah, sunny year round. Now I was there, I think it was it around September time. So again, I'm surprised at the weather. Like, as in, I was expecting to go over there and melt. But it was a very comfortable heat around that
Right.
time of year. Now, like, just like gorgeous, like really, really sunny. But they had, like, as in, I suppose, extreme showers as well, where when we say like it's raining in Ireland, we kind of get like 365 days of rain, kind of at some stage of the day. But over there, it would be absolutely gorgeous weather. And then you could pretty much clock when it was going to rain. So depending on the season, the nuns would be able to say, oh, it's going to, there'll be a rain down out at about 4:30, and it would bucket. And if you were outside in that, you were just drenched head to toe in a matter of seconds, like extreme heavy rain. But like beautiful weather, like absolutely perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect,
yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
So was that you done in Africa then, or did you?
That was me done. So I was there, and like I said, I'd still be in regular contact with them. That was me done there.
And sorry, that's via email presumably, and again, as you mentioned earlier, you send an email 2 weeks later, you might get a
Yeah.
reply, kind of thing.
Via email and now text message. But I suppose they would still send updates on each of the children sponsored. So we kind of do a top-up fundraiser each year. Myself and my mum, like I said, we come from a traditional music background, and my mum would do a concert every year, every 2 years. I think it's just a concert maybe every second year. But every year we do some sort of fundraiser for the school and send it over, and we would always get updates back on, like I said, they're very, very careful on how they spend the money, and always update us on how the children are doing. Where they're going, as in if they think they're going to make it to secondary school, or what it is. So it's fantastic to see that as well. So I suppose encourages us to kind of keep the ball rolling on it as
Oh
well.
yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah, because I suppose for me being there and I suppose supporting my family and my friends, supporting it for a number of years, and even in work they do as well. Like, as in when I ran a fundraiser my first year in work last year, they were very supportive in terms of donating, etc. So we had that close connection to it. So that'll be there, please God, for a long, long time yet. Left Africa, came home in time for Christmas. Had Christmas at home, and then left for Asia. So I suppose completely different to Africa, like completely as you would, other side of the world, completely different culture and all the rest of it. But I was lucky. I started off traveling around with 4 friends. So doing, I suppose, all the bits and pieces in Asia. We arrived in Bangkok, very quickly left for Cambodia. Did most of Cambodia, down southern Vietnam, all up the coast of Vietnam, into northern Thailand, which is Chiang Mai. And then I suppose what the original plan was that me and one of the guys would stay and maybe work for a couple of months, see if we could find something for a couple of months. The other two guys, one was en route to Australia and the other was on the way home from Australia. So he kind of met us there when we started the whole trip. But another really fascinating trip, Cambodia, another country that's very much like going back in time, like is in extreme poverty, but very, very happy people. And just, I suppose, just amazing to see a country that is not fully developed yet. I suppose they're not even close, but that there's so many mind-boggling and striking things to see when you kind of scope them out.
Yeah, the places there, like, you know, Cambodia, Thailand, that part of the world, as you kind of outlined, would be not chock-a-block, but they'd be very used to people kind of stopping on their way to and from Australia. And like,
Yeah.
I know half a dozen people who've spent time over there. Uganda and Rwanda would obviously be slightly different. So just to skip back to Africa, how were you perceived and received by the people on a kind of day-to-day basis? Were you
Yeah.
a novelty white person, or
Yeah. So they used to call me Mzungu,
Mzungu?
which is the word for foreigner or white man.
Right.
But very much, I suppose, if I had gone to Entebbe, if I had gone to the capital, they have people passing through, like businessmen passing through, people there, I suppose, like American tourists or whatnot. So they'd see the odd white person. In Mbarara, they don't. You're very much, it's 6 hours away from the capital. There's no real reason for foreigners to be there. Yeah, I suppose you could say very much a novelty. What I found, like, is in the feel of your skin and your hair. They were fascinated with
No
this.
way.
So quite often, if I could be sitting down, like reading a book or whatever I was doing, and a hand would come up and kind of brush off my hair, and I turn around and there'd be 4 or 5 kids gone running, just to kind of see like what it feels like, is in, because it looks so, I suppose it looks like it's of a completely different texture, I suppose, than their own, and completely foreign to them. And skin would be another one, in terms of, like, because our skin feels different, so they're like, you know, they want to know like what it, like, you know, what it feels like. So there's a fascination with that. But I think they knew I was there to assist in some way. So I received nothing but love while I was there, like, and when I left, I received these gifts, like very, very simple gifts, to some, I suppose, to ourselves, and we still have them there home in Roscrea, but to the people who gave them to me, quite a lot of considerable amount of work, or even of money, would have gone into these. I received everything from a chicken, which of course I couldn't take with me, a live chicken. So that's what we had that evening. That was our final meal before I left. Hand woven baskets, you know, for holding beans. We use it to hold our tea bags and our coffee and bits and pieces at home. So just these like amazing gifts, and like very much focused on the mother. So if they perceive you as a nice person, it's your you know, the credit goes to your mother. So your mother must be fantastic. If you're here helping us, your mother must be fantastic.
Thanks to your mum.
It's thanks to your mum. So despite the fact that she wasn't there, she was sent loads of lovely, like, it's in like hand knitted scarves and bits and pieces, which were just magical.
It's a lovely sentiment, though, isn't it? Because
Beautiful.
I'd never, the thought has never entered my head to get someone who I wanted to give a gift,
Yeah.
you know, give them something for their mum. Do you know that kind of way? But
Yeah.
there's something really cool about that.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. And like, I suppose when I arrived home, like I said, my mum would be my main supporter in everything that I do, and I'd be very, very close to my mum. So I suppose it's fair to say that she was a huge part in me going there, in terms of helping me with every aspect of the fundraising and running her own fundraisers. And I would even say, like, I suppose as I kind of went on to travel in other parts and went on to kind of try and build a career here. She very much kept that ball rolling in terms of supporting the school and keeping contact with the school as well. So so she deserved every bit of the credit, I suppose you could say. But yeah, like I said, I was coming with a lot of bits and pieces that that they had never seen before, like I said, like with the movies, and I looked completely different. And like these guys, like as in the teachers as well, when I would talk to them, I suppose my opinion on certain things would be very different to their opinion on things. And I guess I wouldn't dumb it down. I'd give them my honest opinion if we were talking about religion or politics or anything really. Like I said, anything that you kind of talk about with your mates over a tea or over a coffee.
Yeah.
So it was kind of fascinating to see their opinion from people who live on the other side of the world, and it kind of brings me back to like, because it was a monastery, I suppose I was living in as such, and I think it was a week before I left, I had said to the nuns, like, I would really like to do something nice with just the teachers. These guys work extremely hard, and I guess you could say like they were very selective on very selective on the teachers that they selected to teach in the school. But I would say all the teachers that I worked with there, they really wanted the best for these kids. Now I'm not saying the teachers here aren't the same, but I suppose teaching here is it's a career.
Of course.
And you get good teachers and bad teachers. But the guys I worked with there, they had got to a point where they were, they had an education and they were teachers, and they really wanted the best for these kids. So wanted to give them the best possible opportunity in life. So were super passionate about their job and worked really, really hard. So I wanted to do something for the teachers before I left. So there was, I can't even call it a nightclub. It was basically a massive shed, and they sold like whiskey by the bottle and loads of beer and stuff like that. So I cleared it with the two sisters beforehand, and they were saying that's fine, please be back at a reasonable hour. And I think it was the Friday maybe, and then there was like an evening class the following day and the Saturday or whatever it might be. So they didn't have two rough schedules, but to take them to that and to kind of like the way you kind of see it, you see it in guys doing it here in nightclubs, and they take it and they get like a table and they have all like the expensive vodkas and stuff like that. It wasn't that at all, but like I said, I really felt like a VIP kind of walking in there, and they did as well, which was the real magical part of it. And we walked in and we got our booze and had our whiskey and stuff like that, and had a dance. And I suppose time for fun, we'll say, like outside of work, and leisurely activities like that, like going to nightclubs and bars and stuff like that, is not very high on the agenda over there, as you can imagine. So this was like something that none of them had ever done before. Like some of the teachers had never been to. Now, when I'm saying nightclub, I'm talking it's a shed, no lights or anything like that. So like it's very, very basic with like with their music playing in the background.
And I was just going to ask, their kind of traditional music. So
their traditional music, yeah,
played through speakers or
speakers,
live, or okay.
Speakers. I suppose what I forgot to mention as well is they're saying like there are some parts of it that are modern. For the men, the time you get off, so you work your hours of the week are 7 days a week. It's not the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 what we have.
Yeah.
They know nothing of that over there. It's 7 day a week. You have your job, it's 7 days. The time you get off work a week is the period in which your Premiership team plays football. So the Premiership football is huge over there.
The English Premiership football.
English Premiership football, huge in Uganda, and huge in Rwanda as well.
Bizarre.
It is bizarre. It's mental. And the time you get off work is when your Premiership team is playing. So, we walked. I think it was the bones of maybe 20-25 minutes through fields upon fields upon fields to get to this hut. We were going to watch, I can't remember who was playing. I think it was it Arsenal Newcastle or something like that.
That's so surreal.
And it's in a mud hut, but like there's like a wooden desk at the front, and you can buy snacks before you go in if you want to buy snacks, but you pay like a minor fee going in. It was a mud hut with wooden seats, just like benches going the whole way back. The TV, I would say, was no bigger than an iPad, maybe slightly bigger than an iPad. So you really had to crowd around it. And there was just a wire kind of coming out of it out the back. Tiny TV, a wire going up the walls, coming out somewhere on the roof, I presume. and was picking up Arsenal versus Newcastle. However they were doing it. But all the guys from the local village would come and watch them, and they'd have, I suppose over here, you know, they don't show the 3 o'clock kickoffs and stuff like that, but they show them over there because it's different licenses or whatever. So the time you got off work was when your Premiership football team was playing. And what I forgot to mention about Rwanda is when I was staying with this lady, her nephew picked me up one night and he said, okay, we're going to go watch football. And of all the football matches I've ever been to, I've never experienced an atmosphere like what we brought. It was Man United versus Arsenal. It was the season that Robin van Persie had signed for United. So there was that, from myself as a lifelong Arsenal fan, that bitterness of watching him play for another team. And we were underground. This is like in the middle of nowhere in Rwanda. It's about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And if I recall correctly, he got a goal from a header, and it was an important goal for United, important points. So ran off celebrating, and I was but the atmosphere inside in there was just unbelievable. They live for it. They're absolutely obsessed with their Premiership football, and they all have their Premiership teams. So if you can imagine, Man City, you know, maybe the teams kind of coming up at the time were hugely popular, because I suppose the more competitions that your team are playing in, the more time you get getting off work. So it would be very common to kind of, not like here, to kind of switch. So one season you could be supporting Man United, and then the next season you could be supporting Man City, or whoever you thought, whoever you thought was going to do pretty well. So that was a fascinating side of it. But I guess like we were right next door to England here, and like I used to fly over to London quite a bit to see the games when I was working in Tralee, because you can fly out of Farnford Airport in no time, but never experienced an atmosphere or obsession with football like I experienced there. It was really very, very cool.
No way, that's insane.
Yeah.
So sorry to jump back forward. Then again, you're in Asia, and you did what work did you get? Did you say, or did you get work? You were looking for work for a couple of months.
I started working yet, so we travelled around a bit. We did Cambodia, and then we did Vietnam, which is very, very different. I suppose I should know. I don't. Vietnam is I suppose you could say very modern compared to Cambodia, and I suppose you could say to most of the parts that we went to in Vietnam were much more modern than parts of Thailand that I've been to, that I guess wouldn't be too far from it. I guess the war that took place there and funding afterwards to kind of build the country back up, but beautiful country. But I had been to Thailand the first time 10 years before that, so I had gone for like a 4-week spurt, like kind of off the cuff and gone, and I fell in love with it. And I always said, you know, if I was to ever to go and live in a different country, I'd love to give Thailand a try. So as I said, one of my mates went to Australia, the other guy went back to Ireland, having lived in Australia for a year or two, and 2 of us stayed in Thailand, and we decided we'd try find work in Bangkok. And that was like, when I say we were roughing it for a long time, we were really, really, really roughing it. So we kind of booked into a hostel in Bangkok, cheapest hostel we could find, like 20-bed dorm, none of your possessions safe, so trying to find somewhere, like keeping an eye on them all the time. And I think we had we had a shirt and a pair of pants, like one each between us, and we would go out looking for jobs during the day. So loads of, I suppose, teaching opportunities over there, because I suppose it's safe to say it's still very much a developing country. So loads of teaching opportunities over there. So we got our first teaching job, but they offered us a role. It was maybe 45 minutes outside Bangkok. So they said the pay is not great, but we'll provide you with free accommodation. So we said, okay, look, we're running out of money here. Like, this sounds like a good deal to us. So we took it. So the free accommodation was very much, we'd walk in the evening time, we would spend maybe 10 minutes killing the mosquitoes, like, lovely, just trying to get as many out the door as we possibly could, or, you know, just kind of swatting them away, but it was just very, very basic ground floor apartment. in a village outside of Bangkok, and we teach in the morning and some in the afternoon, sometimes in non-air conditioned rooms, and that was kind of how we were getting by, so to speak.
Yeah.
I suppose we knew it was a transition period. It was like, okay, we'll get something better in a while, but this is just the kind of so as we can stay here. And I suppose we made our own fun. Do you know what I mean? We were in a different country, living among a completely different culture, trying out new foods and stuff like that. This was with my friend Shane, and he would be very easygoing and open-minded as well. I lived with him in college, so I think in the 3 years we were living together in college, if there was even one argument, I'd be surprised. So I knew he was very easy to live with, very easy to get along with. So we kind of went through that for a couple of months until we found our first proper jobs, like proper paid jobs, and we worked in a school. Now, bearing in mind, neither of us had any teaching experience. Our experience of English was growing up speaking English as our first language.
Yeah.
So it's baffling in a way that you can secure a job in secondary schools teaching English with no program. You're just kind of told, go teach English with no kind of program or curriculum to go with. You kind of have to pretty much roll with your own. So that's what we did, I suppose. Like, as in, we were both college educated, so made the best out of it. As in, well, I reckon we did a pretty good job of it. We got our first proper jobs, I suppose, and then with the first proper jobs came our first proper apartment. So we got like a condo. I think we were on the 13th, 14th floor. Nice view. We were close to like the nightclubs, the bars and stuff like that. We had a pool outside and stuff like that, and we were living the life, and it was just brilliant. And I suppose in the time that we were there, would have travelled around to both other parts of Asia and other parts of Thailand, kind of trying to get to see as much as we possibly could. But just an absolute dream to, I suppose, to be over there with a close friend, living in a country the complete opposite to your own in every aspect, and every part of it is just the complete opposite to Ireland. And to be living there and working there and taking it all in was, I guess, what I had wanted to do and what I was trying to get to and achieve for years, to kind of be living and working full time over somewhere. Yeah.
And your fascination of food, have that kicked in at this stage, or?
Yeah, I guess like Thai people they're extremely passionate about their food. It's an obsession for them, so they're extremely passionate about their food, and have, I suppose now I would consider Irish food relatively bland. I suppose I would struggle to give you 10 original Irish recipes, whether they have hundreds and hundreds of various dishes that they'll be able to name off in no time. So I guess the area that we had first started off in, it was very much like there was zero English out there where we were. Now you would find English speakers around the country, and it's becoming more popular in schools, but I guess a lot of the older generation would have very little English. So we were going into restaurants, and the menus were in Thai script, of course, so you've no hope of translating them, even if you did have your phone or internet. So we're very much walking around these restaurants looking for things that look relatively edible.
Yeah.
Pointing at them and saying, like, this is what we want, and they'd bring it out, they'd pronounce it for us. They'd say, like, cow pad gai or cow pad gung, they'd pronounce it. We'd take it down or jot it down as best we could, and if we liked it, we'd know, we'd have it written down. We'd be like, red soup with some sort of fish and white noodles. Give it a score. 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5.
And,
so
and the phonetic spelling of whatever it was called.
Exactly. So we try our best to go back in then the following day or later on in the week, and we knew then if we were ordering that, it was edible, of course. And of course, a lot of their food is very extreme, is extremely spicy, or might be meat that you don't eat, or seafood that you don't eat. It's like a lot of their food is very intense in flavour. So that's kind of where it kicked off. But I suppose the food was always a passion, I suppose, and again didn't derive from my parents. My mom's a good cook, but she wouldn't be passionate about cooking.
Yeah.
I got a lot of it from my brother. So when we were growing up, we'd be up on the weekends till as you would, 12, 1, 2 in the morning, playing video games and stuff like that. And we were grown boys, so we were always hungry. So we'd be trying to concoct bits and pieces at all hours of the morning, whatever we could find in the pantry, the freezer, the fridge. So that's kind of where it started from. And then, of course, school as well, or college, I should say. I hate eating like greasy food or food that's not healthy for me. So in college as well, I was trying to, like, once I was away from home, was always trying to, I suppose, eat relatively healthy, eat decent food.
Yeah.
So as I wasn't putting on weight and all the rest of it. So I suppose the kind of, my love for cooking kind of kicked in then. And then very much when I would travel. And still to this day, the most important part of any of my holidays or any of my breaks away is the food. If I go somewhere and it's bad food, it completely ruins my experience. It's the most exciting part for me. If I even do a city break for 2 days, 3 days, and the food is bad, it's a massive failure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like I suppose the sights and the activities are all an extra. I'm going to kind of experience the different types of food. So I was over in Bangkok, was teaching in the school, and I guess I was there maybe 9 months, and I saw an advert for, there was a company called City Nomads. They were a Malaysian-based company, and they were looking for people who had a relatively decent command of the English language to review restaurants and bars and hotels and whatnot for them, so as they could inform a huge amount of people coming from their country would visit Bangkok on their holidays. So they had a section of this extremely popular website, and I think was also a magazine, where they would tell them the best places to stay, to eat, to drink. So they had no one in Bangkok to do that. So I applied, got the job, was very little pay, was kind of like pay by article, but it kind of gave me a platform and an opportunity to visit the best places in Bangkok, which of course on the teacher salary, which was a very basic salary, I couldn't do.
Yeah.
So I suppose I went from struggling to staying in like 5-star hotels and eating in James, which is like a Michelin star restaurant, and it was just a complete change of lifestyle and getting around to these places. Really kind of upped my experience of the country. I was getting to see so much more of it, and at a completely different level than,
Yes.
I suppose, what I had at the start, which was very much a grind, if you will.
From street food to Michelin star food, basically.
Exactly. Now, in saying that, the street food is the Thai food. If you're looking for the absolute best Thai food, that's where you find it. You find it off the street. The old lady who looks about 115, who's been cooking that dish since she was 16, 17 years old, that's where you'll get like the authentic, the proper food. But it was a fantastic experience to be able to go to these places, and to experience, I suppose, the everything from the street food to the very, very best food that they had to offer. So I was really, really lucky. Yeah.
And where did is this where the food blogging kind of stem from?
Yeah,
or...
I guess like when I moved home, I moved home then, and I suppose I wanted to retain some of that lifestyle. Like, moving home was tough. I was moving home from a country that I absolutely loved, where I had a good lifestyle. We had a swimming pool on our roof. Our rent was 250 per month, 250 euros, the equivalent per month. We had, like, I suppose, everything. It was like a dream lifestyle. So when I moved home, I was very much starting from scratch.
Back home to Roscrea, basically,
Yeah, back home to Roscrea, to my old bedroom. I moved home. I suppose my excuse was, I felt that I had enough. Okay, so I had done a year in Thailand. My friend Shane had gone home. Okay, a year and a half I was there. My friend Shane had gone home. He went home to do Irish exams because he wanted to be a teacher. So he went off home. So then that was a huge change. So I didn't have my friend there with me anymore. I had met a girl there on my birthday. The night of my birthday, to December. So after about a year, I had met a girl there, and we were seeing each other for 3-4 months. She got accepted to study in New York, so she left for New York. So
this is a Thai girl now, was it? Or,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So she got accepted to study in New York, and was going on, and she was very pro education and really wanted to to get her master's eventually and all the rest of it. So I was all for it. Absolutely. And she went off to New York and Shane left, and I guess they left in around the same time. So I suppose the two people who I was interacting with most
Yeah.
were gone in a very short
Yeah,
period
your
of time. So
anchors in the country, basically.
exactly, yeah. So I suppose that changed my experience there, and I started thinking maybe it was time to move home. And it was around the time that An Garda Síochána were recruiting again. So my brother being a guard, I suppose I would very much look up to him, and he, I suppose, for the vast majority of my life was someone who I would very much value their advice. And if I was worried about something, if I was going through something positive or negative, he would be one of the first people I would call. We would be very close. So he was a guard. So of course, naturally, I looked up to him, and that was something that was always, on my agenda.
Yeah,
If
on
the
the cards,
opportunity arises
possibly.
again, I'll go for it. So I suppose that's what I kind of used as my reasoning for coming home. So came home to do the exams, which didn't go to plan, I suppose you could say. I didn't make the mark, if you will. So I had kind of done everything I possibly could in terms of preparing for it, but missed out on one aspect. It was the part of the test that was new for this recruitment. It was like a scenario exam. So they give you a situation, and then they ask you a number of questions, and basically like, what would you do in this situation? So thinking back on it, had I have known better, what I should have done is I should have said, okay, what answer do they want,
Of
rather
course.
than
Yeah,
what would
yeah.
I actually do.
That old
Whereas,
chestnut.
yeah, so I suppose the answers I was given were what I would actually do, rather than what you should be doing. So kind of fell short on that mark. So I suppose in the long run, it turned out to be the best thing, because I love my job now, and I love what I do, and I suppose I'm really happy where I am. As in, I there would be never any morning I would get up and dread going to work. It's exciting and it's new. I suppose every day I work in the housing and homelessness sector. So I suppose, of course, a huge topic at the minute, and a huge issue in Ireland at the minute. So I love what I do. So I suppose in the long term, happy that the guards didn't work out, but it was very much why I moved home. So didn't get it, and fell into a job that I suppose I really didn't like. I suppose the hours I was putting in were benefiting someone's pocket rather than benefiting I suppose someone in a sector I was passionate about, whether that be in the charity sector or whatnot, which I had done for years previously. So I had a huge issue with that. So it just wasn't for me.
It's interesting what you say there. Is that a common theme, that people who work in charities for a year or several years have trouble ever transitioning out of that? Does that make sense?
I suppose personally for myself, I know that I found it very difficult.
Could you like, you love your job now, but for whatever
Yeah.
reason, if you were to, I don't know, move country, or the organization that you worked with, I don't know, restructured and there wasn't a position for you there, would you nearly have to go to another charity, or could you see yourself working for, the man again, or do you know that kind of way?
I suppose at the minute I couldn't. I suppose I've tried it. I've done both. And I find it, I need my job to be fulfilling in
Yeah.
some way. So I suppose I work with people who have come from various different sectors, who were on I suppose less hours but much higher salaries elsewhere, but wanted to be doing something that was giving back to
Yes, meaningful.
exactly. And I think because a lot of them are kind of, everyone's kind of coming in to the centre, coming from different avenues, you're working with people, then you're left with people, working with people who are extremely positive and I guess like-minded to yourself, which is always enjoyable. So it's a fantastic working environment. So I work with amazing people. Like I work with 15 friends, I would say. I hope they would say the same. But like I say, they're just amazing people. Like I said, they come from all different avenues and different backgrounds and stuff like that. But I suppose the common denominator is that they're working there because they want to help people who don't have, I suppose, who didn't have the same opportunities that they had growing up. So it's very fulfilling to do that as your job, as your career. So then to kind of leave that and go out and work for, as you say, the man, personally, I don't know if I could do that.
And in relation to the industry that you're in, because you've mentioned it a number of times that it's prevalent, it's in the media these days. I don't see it. I hear it because I don't watch the news. I don't watch television generally. I don't listen to the radio. I'm out of that kind of
Yeah.
generic media loop, say. But I do hear it mentioned by people kind of in passing. And increasingly over the last 12 months, I think I've heard there's been more talk of it about it than ever before. I think in particular the last two Christmases, say,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. You that's kind of up to your eyes in that industry, what are the common misconceptions that are either in the media or that you see people having generally, or are there any?
Yeah, I suppose going back to what we were talking about earlier on, when people are talking about like donating to charities and stuff like that, I suppose with homelessness, a lot of people, I suppose, have that thing that, like, you know, if someone is homeless, it's because they generally think they have a substance misuse issue, whether that be with drugs and alcohol. Where I guess the reality is that the reasons for people becoming homeless, there's a vast and wide variety of them, everything from family disputes and breakdown to sexual abuse, physical abuse, a huge amount with mental health issues. And then of course, like a lot of the guys who end up in that situation, they never misused any substances beforehand. Like, might have liked the occasional drink, but never misused drugs. But I guess could very easily fall into that that, I suppose, side of things, or very easily fall into a substance misuse issue, I suppose, from a prolonged period of time in and out of hostels or sleeping rough on the street. So it's understandable, because I guess the hard factor is that it removes them from that frame of mind or from that situation for a short period of time, if you're, you know, drinking or taking drugs.
I think the substance abuse generally, I think, is not to generalize too much, but it's nearly always a form of escapism.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who mightn't have a problem as such, but are put it this way, as far as I'm concerned, at least, for whatever that's worth, I think our binge drinking culture is escapism. Do you know, that kind of way people not hating their jobs, but people just not necessarily being fulfilled or doing anything meaningful Monday to Friday.
Absolutely.
And luring a load of pints into you on a Friday or Saturday night is just a distraction, basically.
And I guess it's a huge part of what we do as well, is trying to teach young people about how and why these guys are becoming or ending up ending up homeless. So I guess, like, we do a lot of school talks in teaching young people, and that's one thing I always say, like, you know, how and why do people become homeless? And generally the first two that always come up are drink and drugs. So I kind of discuss with them, you know, the other reasons, and then, like I said, I understand it in a way why they would think like that, because, like, it's in friends of mine, like, would have had that image, and I'm pretty sure I would have given the same answers before, I suppose, educated myself on the sector before I started working there. But it's very much, I suppose, we're trying to change that. We're trying to change the way young people view homeless individuals, and teach them how they've ended up in that situation, so as they're able to correct people. So, you know, if they were to say anything, we'll say, derogatory in the future, walking past, they know how and why these people have ended up in this situation. So it's a huge part of what we do. But yeah, like I said, it's a tough industry to be in, but one, I suppose, at the minute, that there's a huge amount of support for. So, like, one of the great things about the job is that you meet so many amazing people who want to give their time. They want to donate, whether it be through time or volunteering or money, or run a fundraiser. And you meet these people on a daily basis. So it's another fantastic aspect of the job.
And is there particular organisations that you might point people towards that are particularly good in the area, or?
I suppose, like I said, there's the main ones. I suppose Peter McVerry Trust, Focus, Simon, all do, I suppose, work with different demographics, but would all work, I suppose, on similar projects. And I suppose the goal generally at the end of the day for all of them is the same, is to get as many people off the streets as possible and into permanent accommodation. I suppose the figures get released on a monthly basis, and they're constantly on the increase. So I suppose to nip that in the bud, and they're all doing their own separate things, and I suppose have achieved great things in the sector as charities, but I suppose it's a drop in the ocean compared to to what needs to be done, and in terms of solving the issue long term, we're a long way away from that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're flat out with the job. How do you squeeze in time for the blog? The food culture, isn't it? We
The
haven't
hung-
even met. Oh, sorry,
yeah, the Hungry Culchie.
the hungry culture.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
haven't really spoken about it at all.
No, I guess I suppose like what I was saying, I wanted to kind of keep hold of some of the lifestyle that I had when I was living over in Thailand, over
Yes.
in Bangkok. So I guess when I moved home, I suppose by starting up my own food blog, that was very much a part of it. I guess like as in for a long time I was posting up pictures of the food I was eating because it was interesting to me. But a lot of my friends were like, nobody cares what you're eating for your lunch. Nobody cares what you're eating for your dinner. Like, stop doing it. But I was like, some people do. Some people,
fair play.
there's people who are as passionate about food as I am, and I knew that. So kind of set up the Hungry Culchie. And I suppose it started off as I suppose me keeping track of my favorite places to eat. So it really kicked off when I moved to Dublin. So it was a few months after I had moved home, moved to Dublin, and wouldn't have the best of memories. So it was me really keeping track of the names of the restaurants and the dishes that they had. And then I suppose I found that people were kind of following it, to kind of scrolling through and following it, so as they could find their own places. If I was after eating somewhere and the picture looked relatively nice, then they'd plan to go there that weekend, etc., as food blogs work. So that's kind of where it started. That's about like 2 years ago now, and it's kind of grown from there, where we would now work with a lot of Irish producers. So I guess our following would be very heavily Irish based, and we work with a lot of Irish producers, I guess, who want to push their product out there, in terms of pushing their product out there to a wider Irish audience. So again, as I said, myself and my brother would be very passionate about food, particularly Irish food, and most definitely cooking. So let's say, for example, a company might send us their product, and what we'll do is very similar to the tasty videos, which are, I suppose, the most popular online cooking videos. We'll make a recipe out of the product that they've sent us, kind of do a step-by-step recipe guide, and then show the finished product, take some pictures, and it's all in a nice video, I suppose, showing people exactly the process of how to make it. So it's been, I suppose you could say, relatively successful so far. And then there's kind of two sides of it. There's the side where we work with the producers, and then there's the side where we kind of try to market our favourite bars, restaurants, cafes around Dublin, Wicklow, sometimes pepper potted around the country, to kind of tell people where our favourite places are to go, what kind of dishes you can get there, what we thought of the dishes, and I suppose more specifically what's Irish about the food in the cafe. So the dish that we're after eating, that we photographed, what Irish products or what Irish ingredients have gone into this dish. So I suppose for people who are very passionate about food, it's no effort really. It's like, in like, so I have my job, my 9 to 5. This kind of takes place after work on weekends, where, as I said, I suppose a lot of my leisurely activity is spent finding the next best place to eat. I get my exercise in and all the rest of it, but I wouldn't be a big drinker. So I guess the money that some of my friends would spend on boozing, and as you said, like, very, I suppose, part of our culture, an escape, I would spend on food.
Yeah, yeah. We'll definitely get to the training part, but before I forget, and I'll hopefully I'll hopefully remember to ask at the end for your your different social media.
Handles.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. But on the off chance that I don't think of it, what are they? How will people find you, or what do you have? Is there a website, a Twitter handle?
Yeah, so there's
Facebook?
a website, which is hungryculchie.ie. Then there's Facebook, which is @hungryculchie, Twitter, which is @hungryculchie, and Instagram, which is @hungryculchie. Snapchat is there as well. We kind of just missed that generation, so we're still learning how to use it. But I suppose the Instagram handle would be by far the most popular. And yeah, that's basically what it is. It's just kind of finding really, really nice dishes around Dublin, taking pictures, taking videos, telling people what's Irish about it and what we thought of it. So I suppose people would use it if you're based in Dublin or plan to visit Dublin anytime soon. I suppose it's a fantastic outlet to kind of scroll through. Depending on what you're in the mood for, you'll come across something that you're craving or that you haven't had in a while. By scrolling down, you'll say, okay, perfect, and you click on the location and it'll take you pretty much straight to the door. So that was the idea around it. And in the process of kind of building up the following that we have got to eat some phenomenal dishes along the way.
Oh, well, believe it. And the
Yeah.
2 years that you're kind of, I suppose you've been, in a weird sense, you've been kind of cataloguing Irish food over the past years.
Yeah.
Are there trends that you've seen kind of come and go, or what? Have you noticed anything kind of change, or have you, I suppose, have you made yourself aware of what mightn't have been, or what wouldn't have been on your horizons previous? Do you know, kind of, have you discovered something that people aren't really aware of, or I don't
Well,
know, what have you found?
I suppose the big thing now is healthy eating. People are a
Yes.
lot more health conscious. So with that, I suppose that and dietary requirements, which were almost unheard of in Ireland 15, 20 years ago. You couldn't go into a cafe and ask for something that was gluten free. I suppose that there was, well, my knowledge, definitely not in Roscrea. You can't go into too many restaurants and ask for like a vegan friendly dish, if you will. So I suppose the Dublin in particular, and I suppose the cities would very much cater for a wide variety of dietary requirements and all the rest of it. But I suppose bits and pieces pop up and they kind of come and go in terms of popularity. It was smoothies for a long time.
Yes.
Now then it was pizza shops. Burritos were around for a couple of years. Now burritos, I suppose you could still say, are there, but donuts is the big one at the minute. So I suppose I'm anxious to see. I don't know what it is just yet, but I'm anxious to see what replaces all the donut stores around Dublin in 2 or 3 years to come. Because you can't go 20 feet in Dublin now at this stage without coming across the next best donut place
In the world.
in the world. So that'll be replaced in time. But kind of fads, they kind of come and go. But the healthy eating one is well, I hope is around to stay. Because I suppose it's brilliant that people are becoming more health conscious and more conscious about what they're putting into their body, and because of that, companies have to be more conscious about what they're putting into their product, because if they're filling their product with crap, people are more knowledgeable on it now, and they're not going to purchase it. So there's that kind of pressure on companies. So you see companies taking certain measures to make their product that little bit extra healthy, or I guess not as crap as it used to be.
Yeah, of course, and I think buying Irish goes a long way there as well, because if between being environmentally friendly and wanting to kind of support your local community, and that by default you're kind of eating better because it hasn't traveled from halfway around the world. It hasn't been, in cold storage, or it hasn't been gassed or picked before it was ripe and ripened, in a warehouse somewhere in the port, or whatever else.
Exactly, and it was a huge reason of it was how we got to work with so many Irish producers, was going to the likes of the Ploughing Championships and meeting, the butcher from Mayo who's there, who has like this like huge pride in the sausages he's selling, and he's able to explain to you there over the counter exactly where that's come from. And I suppose we kind of see that in some of the supermarkets. It's become like a real trend that people want to know, like, is in what I'm buying. I want to know where it's coming from. So what you see now in a lot of the supermarkets is they have like a picture of the farmer on the front, and Donny from Kerry, that's where your beef's after coming from, because you don't have that interaction with them. So there's a name for it, but it's lost on me now. But people want to know exactly where their food is coming from. So yeah, I suppose meeting producers at markets and various different food festivals, telling them what we do and saying, we love your story, we'd love to promote your product, and we kind of go from there. So we've got to meet some fantastic people along the way, and like I said, our knowledge of food has grown exponentially from that, and we really try to push Irish producers and Irish SMEs, like small Irish businesses, because it's a tough industry to be in. A lot of them have a huge amount of competition from the big boys in the supermarkets, who are able, of course, to sell similar products for a bit cheaper. But then I suppose we're trying to push the quality of the Irish producers, and to inform people of exactly where it's coming from and the backstory of the producer. So highly enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. And have you met many producers in your, in the 2 years of doing this, or what types of producers have you
Oh,
spoken with?
everything from butchers to protein bar makers, everything, you name it, and we've kind of worked with them. Everything. Like, listen, I'm looking here. I brought 2 packets of biscuits with me from East Coast Bakehouse, which are another Irish company. But like I said, that's what we're trying to do. Is just find there's new producers on them every single month. There's new producers entering the market. I said I'm a big fan of what Super Value do when you walk into the store and they have the food academy. I think it's a fantastic initiative, because basically what they do with that is they try and take these companies who might have very little funding, and what they do is they kind of give them a blueprint on how to make it and help them along the way. Like, as in, they kind of bring them up with them, and then kind of put them in various different stores in their locality to see how they kind of do in the local store, and then it might span out to the county, might span out to the province, and then eventually, I suppose, nationally. And some of the ones that have made it nationally, like the likes of Cool Beans. Have you ever heard of Cool Beans?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I love Cool Beans. So I think the two girls started it. They kind of started it, and the idea was, if they were on the run, whether it be studying or working, they wanted something that they could literally heat up really, really quick that was still healthy. So their beans are really, really healthy, Irish, and they're a really, really nice team as well, a really, really nice bunch. So there's loads of companies like that who I guess need that little bit of an extra push, in terms to push them out there and to kind of make them known to the wider Irish audience. So so that's essentially what we try to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valuable service that you give. Just by, I suppose, I know myself as a relatively small producer, and especially if you're, a kind of an owner manager type setup, which a lot of
Yeah,
these SMEs, if not
yeah,
all SMEs, typically are, between accounts and payroll and tax and just keeping revenue happy and sales. There's an awful lot that goes on top of actually making the fucking thing that you
yeah,
sell, like,
yeah,
that kind of way.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people are very good at what it is that they either set, or what it is that they either bake or cook or grow or raise or whatever it is, but they mightn't necessarily have the kind of the business tools.
yeah.
And you guys, to a degree, take a certain part of the marketing hassle off them. I mean, if you write an article saying you've got, I don't know what kind of following that you guys have online, like.
We're at about 30,000 at the minute, but that spreads across. I suppose that would spread across everything between the website blog, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But everything combined, it's about 30,000. Mainly Dublin based. I suppose Dublin, pepper potted around the country, but mainly Dublin based, because, like I said, a huge part of the blog is cafes and restaurants in Dublin, because that's where I'm based, that's where I'm living. Me and my girlfriend are living, so we generally do the cafes and the restaurants. The producers kind of come from all over the country. So when we're covering a producer, when we're kind of marketing a producer, we always make sure to include where you can buy that product, because
Yes.
sometimes they're not at a national scale yet, so you might only be able to buy their product in 5 super values in County Wexford, for example. But I guess, like, as in, if you like the product enough, you'll go back for more, if you will. Like, there's one that I was kind of telling you off air earlier. One of my favorite ones is the Origin protein bars, that are based in County Kerry, which you can order online, but to my knowledge can't buy in Dublin just yet. But basically, it's a market that is, you can walk into any store and get, there's like 20 different types of protein bars in there. This one in particular is extremely healthy, so it's kind of cut out all the crap out of it, and they're absolutely phenomenally delicious. So I suppose there's loads of companies like that who, I suppose, without going to these things, I would never know. I would never kind of come across, or so there's loads of, I suppose, Irish companies out there who produce a fantastic product, but they're just kind of hidden to the wider Irish audience for a short period of time. So what we try to do is kind of boost that up, to kind of boost it along, to let people know what it is, where they can buy it, and what we think of it.
Yeah, no, and fair play to you again. I think, as I said, like it's a much needed and valuable service that you're providing. You mentioned as well this idea of going to like food festivals and farmers markets. That seems to be an industry that's exploding in itself. People have a real interest in food and artisan produce and local producers and new and different and healthy, fresh local produce. It's
Yeah.
great to see.
Yeah, well, I suppose with people becoming more health conscious, like I said, they want to know where their food is coming from. So the easiest way to do that is by going to your local farmer's market, where you're literally meeting the person who has produced this food, and they can tell you everything about the product that you're buying, where it's come from, how long it's been there, how they've grown it, what they've used to grow it. And sure, there's no better way of as in, and you enjoy the food more. I do anyway, personally. If someone has given me a background knowledge of where this particular piece of food has come from, like even in a restaurant, if I go in and order a dish and there's 5 different bits and pieces on the plate, and the waiter or the waitress is able to tell me where these have come from and where they've got them from, I enjoy it more. It's not just a plate of food. There's like a history behind it, if you will. And I just find it so much more enjoyable, and tasting the little parts of it and little bits of sauce and stuff like that, because a lot of work has gone into, I suppose, bringing these bits and pieces together. And it's the same with farmers markets. People are going to go and yeah, and to gather up knowledge on what they're buying. Albeit, I suppose some of them are a little bit more expensive, if you will, but if you're passionate about food, for me it's very much worth it.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. We can't talk about healthy food and a healthy lifestyle and training without mentioning jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
When did you get into the jits?
I got into jiu-jitsu when I moved to my current apartment. And I suppose with all the eating food, I needed to find an avenue where I was going to shed some of the fat. So I'm naturally slim enough, but I suppose when you're eating the amount of food that I do be eating, it gradually takes its toll as the metabolism is slowing down, etc. So I hate running. For whatever reason, I just find it unbelievably boring. Some people find it extremely therapeutic. I've an overactive imagination, so kind of when alone with my thoughts for a long period of time, it's not very relaxing for me.
You need somebody trying to strangle you to distract yourself.
Exactly, and that's the thing about jiu-jitsu. You see, like, is in when there's someone who's 18 stone trying to put their knee in your neck, you can't think about the trouble that you're having at work, or the argument that you've had at home before you left.
Yeah, the pile of washing or whatever.
Yeah,
it is,
the pile of washing, or the exam you have coming up. The only thing you're thinking of is, how do I get this guy's knee off my neck?
Yeah.
So you kind of, if you will, I find it very therapeutic that when I go, I simply cannot think of anything else bar what I'm doing. That current role, what I'm doing in that moment. Now, I'd love to be going a lot more often than I do, but with work and personal life and stuff like that, I get there as often as I possibly can. But never in 30 years have I ever done anything that I find as therapeutic as jiu-jitsu, which sounds outrageous because there's people trying to hurt you in some way, shape or form, and to get you to submit, to kind of outthink you and to beat you, basically. So, but I find it very therapeutic. Like every evening I leave there, I feel like I've emptied out a huge amount of junk from my head, from my body, from everything. And of course, as you know yourself, it's extremely physically demanding. So I suppose over time you feel fantastic. Not during the rolls. They're never.
But it's
they're enjoyable,
but it's like a workout. You mightn't enjoy it per se whilst you're doing it, but you'll always enjoy having done
exactly.
it. I think there's something very meditative in a kind of counterintuitive way about rolling and kind of sparring in jiu-jitsu, because it really does force you to be in the moment.
Yeah.
Like what we spoke about the guys living in Uganda, there's obviously nobody trying to pull their arm off or choke them out. But there's something to that being forced to be in the moment, and I suppose just forget about the trivial bullshit that we tend to find all consuming, whether it's the bills or the job or the, the row you had with herself. But
Yeah.
where are you training? Give
Uh,
props to the
it's
club.
it's a gym run by a man called Barry Oglesby. Barry, to my knowledge, would be very well known, I
Yes,
suppose, with the
yes.
jiu-jitsu community in Ireland. And the gym is called Kyuzo, Kyuzo. It's very, very near Blanchardstown, Ashtown, Castleknock, that general area. And it's just fantastic. Like, I suppose, like, for me, I'm not a dub, so moving up here, a huge part of why I enjoy it is the social aspect to it as well. Do you know, like, the lads, if you will, do you know that some people get from being part of a GAA team or a football team or whatnot. Like, I played football when I was growing up as well. But it's, I suppose, the culture that's there as well. It's a very positive environment. And then it's not just the jiu-jitsu as well. Like, as in, I suppose, Barry, he's a fantastic individual to listen to. His opinion on different things. Like, of course, beforehand everyone's having the chats, and afterwards you're kind of going through maybe bits that you did wrong and stuff like that. But he sends out like an email a couple of times a week. On various different thoughts. Sometimes it's just like it's as random as a box of frogs. Do you know what I mean? It could be about anything, but it's always something. I always read it, and at the end of it, really gives you something to think about. And then on top of that, some people pay huge subscriptions to kind of get that takeaway from something, whether it be an app or a book or whatever it
Yeah,
might be.
absolutely. Yeah, it's self-help book or
Exactly, yeah. So it's just fantastic. And then, like I said, yeah, a great bunch of lads. And then for fitness, it's just amazing. And confidence, like a complete difference in my confidence in the past year and a half that I'm there compared to before. That now I suppose, like I said, a year and a half, I'm at jiu-jitsu, and there's guys doing it like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Some guys doing it their whole lives. I by no means would be would be my knowledge of jiu-jitsu, is what I'm saying, is very, very basic.
yeah.
But I reckon even at this stage of a year and a half of doing it, I would definitely have the confidence now to know, like, God forbid, if I was ever in a situation where I was in trouble, I would have the basic knowledge to be able to protect myself or the person beside me, whether that be my girlfriend or whoever it might be, with a relatively good level of confidence. Whereas before, I wouldn't have done. Do you know what I
Straight to
mean?
the fetal position kind of thing.
Pretty much. And, like, do you know, like, isn't even in school, and when you see like altercations like out in a nightclub or something like that, it used to make me look super uncomfortable. Do you know, like, seeing stuff like, God, like, isn't you see some chap getting hammered, and you're going like, God, what would I do? Like, if that was me, like, as in, like, I'm in his position, like, as in, I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, if someone decided that they were going to target me, I wouldn't know what to do. And of course, growing up, do you know, everybody's been in that position at some, well, most people in that position got a few thumps off someone, or, do you know,
Yeah,
the
no,
school
it
bully or
happens,
whatever
yeah,
it might
yeah.
be. Yeah, of course. So it's just giving me a completely different level of confidence, that I know, right, okay, do you know, I have the basics. Do you know what I mean? And then what I love about it as well is, like, I see, like, it's the art of it, where you can see someone who is, you know, a teenager that's 9 stone, 10 stone, and they're getting the better of some guy who's 15, 16 stone, just because they're more technical. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
As in, like, it's
absolutely,
obviously like, as in, weight is a huge advantage, but I suppose the longer you're at it, and you see it all the time in the gym, guys who are much, much smaller getting the better of much bigger guys, just because they have that technical side of it, which is great to see. That I suppose the advantage is nothing got to do with, you know, how big or how strong you might look. That it's very much, you know, about how well you're able to defend yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and like it's often referred to as a thinking man's martial arts.
Yeah,
And I think one of the things that I love about it is the way that you can do it into old age. It's not as if, you know, Jesus, you're 30 now, Michael. You know, you want to be wrapping up your
yeah,
jiu-jitsu career. Like,
yeah,
as you said yourself, like, you're at a year and a half. You're only getting started. You've another, 40 years at it
yeah, yeah,
if you so wish. You
absolutely.
know.
Yeah,
But I think the beauty of having you speak in those terms about it, and I think it's you almost said that, look, you're only doing it a year and a half. You're no expert, but there's a beauty to that, because I've spoken at length about jiu-jitsu on this podcast, and I've had two black belts on previously, and granted now they were coaches, but it's great for people to hear someone who's only at it, a relatively short space of time, and speak so kind of passionately about it, because people who give it a lash, and people who give it a try and like it, tend to fucking love it. Like,
Yeah,
do you know that kind of
yeah.
way? That's the really cool thing about
And
it.
as the joke goes, it's like about jiu-jitsu. If you love jiu-jitsu, you talk about it all the time. Like my niece, she's 9. She asked me recently. She was like, "Do you know what grade are you?" I was like, "Oh, I'm only the first grade. Like I'm only a white belt." She was like, "I thought you were a black belt." And her and my son, they were just disgusted at me. And I was like, "Why did you think that?" And she's like, "Because you never shut up talking about it." And it's just like, it doesn't really work like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be 10 years. It could be 11, 12 years before you get that far. But like, as the joke goes as well, like, how do you know if someone's vegan? Because they'll tell you. And it's very much like that about jiu-jitsu. Like, as in, you just get this, you get addicted to it, and it's all you want to talk about, and you want to watch movies, and you want to watch documentaries or what's the word I'm looking for? YouTube clips of techniques and bits and pieces
Yeah,
in
of
your
course.
spare time. But like I said, I'd love to be doing it more than I actually am. But I go through I face very like a wave emotions. I generally get there maybe once a week. On a good stage, I'd get there 2 or 3 times a week. Some stages of the year. From September onwards, it kind of whittles down, and that's very much depending on work and how busy we are. But I can't ever see myself. There would be stuff, of course, that I've kind of fads that I've fallen into and then I've given up. But I definitely could never see myself at this point ever willingly giving it up.
Yeah, I think,
and that's for sure.
I think one of the great things about jiu-jitsu is that the learning curve is so steep.
Yeah,
If you go once or twice a week for 2 or 3 months, you're like you're at a masterful level in comparison to somebody that's there on the first day, and there's something really cool about that. And
Yeah.
and likewise, in another 6 months, you're light years ahead of someone 6 months previous to
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Which is great. But look, I love plugging the club, Oglesby Club. What was the name of it again?
Cayuso. Yeah.
Cayuso, in, was it Blanche, Ashtown direction?
It's out near Ashtown. Yeah.
Okay. Give us a rundown of the social media for the Hungry Culchie again.
At Hungry Culchie, so HUNGRYCULCHIE, and that will be across all of them. That's across our YouTube channel, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, the whole lot.
Okay, brilliant. Well,
Yeah.
for anyone looking to check you out, give them a like, give them a share, give them a comment. All that stuff goes a long way. I'm sure you'd agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And listen, Michael, I've taken up enough of your time. Thanks a million for
Thank
coming
you so
on.
much for having me. Thanks
Cheers.
a million.